12:05. Let's go ahead and get started. This meeting is being recorded for people who registered and can't join us today, or just the community that's interested in learning about artists, makers, creatives, and how they contribute to public art in the community, how they could build their careers, all of that good stuff. So I would like just to do quick introductions of audience members before we kind of talk about Brendan and what you do. So yeah, hi Allison, would you like to go first? We'd love to know your name, where you're calling in from, and what you're hoping to get out of this session today.
Okay, I'm Allison. I am in Denton, and I was just interested in finding out kind of what sort of opportunities are out there to get involved in the community and that sort of thing. So it's kind of what I was hoping for.
Great, welcome. Thanks for calling in. Mary or Heather? I don't know if y'all have met Brandon.
Yeah, so my name is Mary. I am the community coordinator at Stoke. I also do a lot of the social media content. I am working on starting to do like freelance editing and freelance graphic design. So yeah, I'm kind of working towards a creative entrepreneur career as well right now. So
good deal.
Thanks, Mary. And I saw that you unmuted. Heather, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm Heather. I'm the owner and executive director here at Stoke, and just excited to tune in and learn about what Brandon has been doing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Right.
Thanks, Heather. Okay. I will do a formal introduction, and then I'm going to ask you questions, Brandon.
Sure.
So this is from 23 Design Co. Brandon is a working artist, entrepreneur, and owner of Global Waterjet and 23 Design Co. He was formerly trained in art, architecture, and experience in machining. Is that how you say machining?
Yeah.
Cool. Contracting and business solutions. With the teachings of his mentors, counsel, and network, he seeks to educate, develop, and collaborate with creators to develop their own brand or business. Oh, and I love this quote that you've included. Is it one of your favorites by Walt Disney?
Yes,
Yay.
it is.
You can design, create, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality. Great. I feel like that really echoes, the conversation that we had that kind of prefaced this lunch and learn session for empowering Denton's creative entrepreneurs. And one of the things that really interested me about what you do is the mentoring that you provide and the business coaching, which I think is really important for artists and creatives, because you might learn your craft and your skill and really hone that, but then when you're out of the kind of university or intellectual pool or wherever it is that you trained, you are kind of left to your own devices and maybe feeling like you're flailing around and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd love for you to share a bit about your background and your education, speaking of where you got your training, and your work experience. You mentioned that you became the owner of your own company. 2020 was a wild ride for y'all, much as it was for everyone in the world.
Yeah.
And a bit about maybe your mission for 23 Design Co. and whatever else you'd like to share. And welcome, Jillian.
Yeah. So I guess starting with my background in education, out of high school, I was interested in pursuing architectural engineering. So I started my base course loads for that, and then slowly found that I wanted to go into more creative pursuits through the arts. And honestly, I thought I was going to be a painter for the longest time. But I always had a background and did work experience in construction and building homes, renovating, designing things when I could, all that. And I took an elective class up at the University of North Texas in sculpture and met my mentor, Richard Davis. And he also was an architect, studied for it, and actually did it for a while. And then a builder, a welder, a sculptor. I mean, he was everything, and we just connected really, really strongly about a decade or so ago. And he was like, "Hey, you got to come out in my studio, and I'll teach you how to weld these sculptures." And it was like, okay. So that kind of started both, my direction into sculpture, and then also my interests into actually building things that were a little bit more custom and complex. And that kind of led hand in hand into discovering machines up at the University of North Texas. They had CNC machines and 3D printers. I helped them build out their first fabrication lab prior to going into grad school at UNT. So I was really one of the few people playing with CNC machining and trying to build at a bigger level. And that was really exciting because it's like a whole new language. So from there, went out into the workforce. Didn't complete my master's degree because I had a family. So I decided to go into the workforce and did all kinds of odds and end jobs, contracting, into general contracting eventually, custom fabrication builds, a lot of design builds for real estate development and stuff like that. So I kind of had my hands in a lot of stuff. And I was taking work, either my personal sculptures or client projects, to a local machine shop here in Denton called Global Waterjet. And I did a lot of work with them for several years until one day the owner asked me if I'd like to buy the company from him. And I was like, oh, okay, I gotta figure that out. So just kind of plunged like headfirst into this new business world and being an owner of an actual small business. And it was a really wild learning curve. And I think just about when I started to get up on my feet, that was 2019, 2020, early 2020, manufacturing supply chains started to kind of like dry up a little bit. And we did a lot of fabrication for people either overseas or on the East Coast. And they were just like, hey, something's going on. So work started to dry up then. And then we got the news of COVID and the shutdown. And we were forced to pivot because of all of our clients that we had, 99% of them basically either liquidated or discontinued their business. So at that point, it was, what do we do kind of deal? How do we figure it out? And I was running a mentorship program at the time, and it was basically where students from the university could come in and take a tour of the shop and see digital fabrication at that scale, but with, from the art program with somebody that had an art background. So it was a nice blend of educating them about, real world possibilities that could be career options through machining and creative fabrication, stuff like that. So with that in the back of my mind, my team and I at that point were from that mentorship program, and we decided, hey, let's go big. And we know how to build, we know how to fabricate, machine, engineer, all that. So let's start jumping into public sculpture calls. And we did. And we did it first here in Denton for our dog park sculpture up at North Lakes Dog Park, Fetch. And that was really inspiring, really challenging, because it was kind of our first rodeo at that scale. And we wanted to, do something big and wild, and we did. And boy, we learned a lot from that. And then it just kind of trickled down into that, and we started to learn, more about how the city was developing as a whole, Parks and Recs master plan, like all these real in-depth things that you wouldn't think of when it just comes to artwork, and how it actually goes out and exists in the world. So luckily, a lot of my general contracting background and stuff like that kind of started triggering, questions or approaches that we could take to secure more contracts. And we just kind of been growing slowly ever since and taking on new clients and, you know, kind of branched out a little bit. And now we're pushing into some more, I guess our own interests, which are how do we develop public sculpture even to the next point, and make it something our own that we can share. So that's where crypto, NFTs, and production methods of building things really kind of all came together. And our current project now is very community active, and it gets work out into the public quickly. And we're just right now at the stage of our project into, like, you know, marketing, promoting, sharing with people, building that sense of community and pointing it towards public art and creative endeavors for people. So that's where we started to have our weekly meetup at the Denton workbench for anything creative, really. It isn't just solely focused around crypto and NFTs. We just like promoting the idea of self-sovereignty for creatives, because, you know, like you said last May, it was that you might learn all your training and skills and stuff at school, but that's typically the extent of what you learn from a traditional education background. And then when you go out into the real world, the business world is, you know, it's a dog eat dog world out there, and that can be a shock for a lot of people. So we just want to create awareness and spaces as much as we can to invite people to join the conversation, especially creatives and young creatives in school. Very much encouraging that.
Awesome, thank you. Keeping an eye on the waiting room here. I do have a couple of questions just from what you've shared so far. I will admit that I don't know what CNC is, so I would like a quick definition of that.
Oh, sure.
And I also wonder what maybe some of your favorite projects around Denton have been. I have perused the 23 Design Co. website myself and seen some of the work, but just for people on the call right now and maybe people watching this recording or listening to it, if you could share maybe about the metal sign work, maybe around town that we may not know or other people may not know, actually
sure, yeah.
came through y'all. So I'll just start with those two. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So CNC stands for computer numeric cutting. And basically what that means is we design whatever it is in a CAD program, and that's computer aided design program. So everything is digitally designed, and then we transfer those designs into machining code, which is CNC. And it can go through various machines, whether it's a router that can do 2D and 3D routing and cutting, or Waterjet, which is 2D cutting, so that's one plane, or laser, plasma. There's so many CNC machines out there, but where we were specializing was Waterjet cutting, because we could cut any material on the Waterjet. So mixing and matching those materials gave us a real great competitive edge as far as public sculpture goes, because a lot of the time we do mix and match materials, either for engineering purposes, design reasons, or just aesthetics. So that's CNC. And what was the other question? Sorry, I got technical.
No worries. Yeah, I was like, maybe I should just go down the list. And if there are any audience questions, please feel free to unmute and ask away. But the second question that I had was about I guess the projects that we may walk by every day if we are on the Denton Square that we don't realize has come through your companies, and if there were any kind of favorites or if there were moments of triumph after a particular challenge, design challenge or something for those projects.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done quite a bit of the metal sign work around the Denton Square. So we did, oh my gosh, we did Discover Denton, we did Bearded Monk, Barley and Board, the Loophole. I was actually GC on that project for the design of it and fabricator for their signs. So that was a challenge because it was real specialty work. So I kind of had to balance fabrication with, you know, running the job. So that one was very fun. And then let's see, we did the new City Hall sign on McKinney. That was kind of where we first got hooked up with Parks and Rec, and that relationship has just been fantastic ever since. And then we have a couple other things in the works with them as far as signs go. They're not solidified yet, but we talk about them. And let's see, I mean, there's been various small projects around Denton that, you know, people would just come in and need help cutting or doing, or but yeah, a lot of sign work. That's kind of how we stepped into the creative stuff. And then we got really creative with some signs down in Dallas with lighting and different material mixtures and things like that. But my favorite right now has been the fire station sculpture that we just completed in April. And that one was really nice because we got to go and speak with the chief initially and ask him what he wanted. And chief of fire battalion for 30 years, you could imagine what his response might be. And he was like, I don't care what you put here. If we don't use it, you know, whatever, put an acorn there. And it was like, okay, chief. But I was trying to deep dive a little bit deeper into that. And, you know, they talked about their history. They talked about, you know, their traditions and functionality of everything. And so we went back and brainstormed on that and decided, let's make it something that they can use, but also honor them at the same time. And most firefighter memorials that we were looking at were very, very sad. You know, it was in remembrance, and we wanted to honor them on their daily, you know, pulling in and pulling out, where the position in the sculpture was going to be located. It was, you know, pulling in and pulling out, so they would see it every day. And we were like, most of their calls are service calls and first response calls. So let's celebrate who serves at that station with this concept of when they retire, they get their shield number and name custom cut out and placed and added to this sculpture. And after that, I mean, oh my gosh, Chief came in and he was a whole different person. He was just so excited. He was like, oh my gosh, I make shields at home out of wood. And, you know, I do all this. Like, he just opened up. It was amazing, you know, and then that just kind of trickled down into the community. And once the dedication was, you know, once we had the dedication, a lot of people showed up. And I think it was like 17 chiefs, you know, for the first time in however many years, in 20 years or something, had come together, you know, and all got to share something special. So that one was definitely like one that strikes home, I think, for the whole team.
That's incredible. That sounds so beautiful. Is it the fire station at Hickory and Bell?
Fire Station 3 on Avenue A in 35.
Okay, neat. Wow. That's amazing. One of the questions that I had was just about, you know, your thoughts on public art and the community, simply because, again, you mentioned that public art exists to beautify space, but it can also serve a different purpose, or like multiple purposes in addition to that. But I feel like we can kind of move that to the second half of the conversation, because there is a question related to these projects in the chat from Heather. She is curious to know how you go about getting these projects and contracts. Do you submit RFPs or are you hired privately?
Okay, how you doing, Heather? We so for these are municipality bids. So the first thing that you have to do is find the call, find the open call, right? Because if they're it's complicated, but I'll try to do my best to keep it linear. So if it's under a certain amount of money in the state of Texas, open calls aren't always necessary because they could just consider it as a purchase in whatever department. Now, if it's over a certain amount of money, and it depends where you're at, it's either $50,000 or $100,000, that's when it's required by the state of Texas to become a national call, or at least an open call that either a pre-selected group of artists on those lists are privy to based on their skill sets, or you watch those committees and everything and wait for them to announce those calls and then go after it that way. So initially we weren't on any of those calls, but we were a registered vendor for the city of Denton, and that kind of got our foot in the door. And then after that, I literally harassed the director of Parks and Rec until he returned my phone call. But it was persistence, you know, it was that's really the right word. But you know, I just persistently upkept and was like, we're a local shop, come by, you know, we can do these things, we got some ideas, and just over and over and over until we broke some ground and then got to work. So that was kind of our approach. And there's no right or wrong, but some you know, art committees or private call groups, you know, ask for you like once a year. They're going to have an open for application, and it's usually at the beginning of the fiscal year. They'll announce that, and then you can go in and fill out those applications and get on their lists. But at that point, you're competing with anywhere from, you know, 50 for a small town to 8,000, depending on the city. So, you know, I think where we found success was because we were local, and then we started to slowly kind of grow out from there into Fort Worth and Dallas, because those are places like if it needed to be, I could be there in an hour and be present and kind of, you know, help just get my way through that door by just, it's like, we're here, you know. That persistence really is probably the key. Did that answer your question? Anything from that you'd like to get specific on?
No, I mean, I just, I think it's helpful to hear kind of, you know, that a lot of it is about relationships and kind of knowing where to look. And then it sounds like, you know, just being a local shop, then you got not just the public work, right, but have established relationships with local businesses, and getting in with Main Street helps, you know. It sounds like you've done a lot of work, you know, downtown. I didn't even realize all of that. So it's cool. It's good to hear.
Good deal. Yeah, and you know, like taking that one step further, that's, you asked, that's the public side. The private side is, you know, a whole different ball game, but it still has that same key element of persistence. And coming from, you know, the construction industry, you know, that's where we first started looking for private bids and things like that. Was like, if somebody was doing a remodel, if there was a new development happening, like how could we get in and serve whatever need they might have, you know, because a sign could lead to a sculpture, or a sign could lead to a production run, or you just never know. So we did a lot of like blanket, cold calling for a lot of the developments here in North Texas. And I'm just curious, what's your background? Are you like public sculpture, or yeah, what are you interested in pursuing?
Well, I mean, my background is actually in architecture.
Okay.
So
Okay.
similar in that way. Yeah, I mean, in my past life, I was a creative, but not so much anymore. Being the owner of the business that of Stoke. So
Right.
yeah, but we do have a contract with the city. So but we didn't have to go through the RFP process for it.
Sure, yeah.
Well, I guess we did originally, like years and years and years ago. Oh, lost me. What did you just say? I am a creative.
Quiet,
Yeah.
creative. Okay.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, Stoke went through a space refresh and a redesign, and as much as we did like hire Hollingsworth and Co., Heather played a really important part in choosing ultimately, right? Like choosing how the space would change and grow and breathe a different kind of life into it.
Yeah.
In 2020. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, you made it through that period, so you got that persistence down. I know that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, I guess I'll ask one more question, but then I'll let other people chime in. I'm curious to know, like, you are a creative person, right? But you're also now like running your own business. So what have you found are some of the challenges, or like, what skills did you feel like that you had to learn, or that you have to do that you didn't necessarily want to, or like think you would as a creative person? I think, we see a lot of folks in Denton who are artists or makers or musicians, that maybe don't also identify as entrepreneurs, but ultimately they are.
Right.
So I'm just curious to know how that is for you, that kind of overlap.
Yeah. Whenever I really jumped into like a brick and mortar business, and even a little bit before that, through contracting, communication is definitely one. I think what I learned most, because I put myself in that position of a brick and mortar, and every day, I mean, I talk so much now, and I was known as like the quiet person, very much so for a long time in just a few years before I got my business. And now nobody can shut me up. It's a problem. I feel bad for my team. But communication definitely is one of the biggest strengths that I've gained, but also I know one of my biggest weaknesses still, because there's still that revert back into I'm gonna be quiet and go in my shell because I want to be in creative mode, So that balance that's my duality, that's my juxtaposition. So sometimes I'm on it great, other times I drag my feet because I'm like, even just still learning every day. Like, you got to do it, you got to talk, you got to set yourself up this way. And I found that to be helpful. It's like, either going through it firsthand through my wife, or through my team, and then that just gives me that little extra, all right, let's jump on the call, or just go introduce yourself or whatever, right? So
yeah,
because
you're the salesperson ultimately, right? Which
exactly.
I think that's maybe part of that mental barrier for entrepreneurs, or for creatives to take that real step into entrepreneurship, is like, or to identify that way, is like, yeah, then ultimately like you're selling yourself, or you're selling your work, and it maybe feels icky. Right. But ultimately, yeah, those clients and that revenue essential for living and
Yeah.
paying bills and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I tell people, it's like the best sales that you can do is just push that word aside. The numbers, what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
As a creative, you have this final product, but you also have that story of the inspiration, the making it, you have so much information there. And it's like, besides selling, just inform and overload them with information to where there is no choice, at that point. If the sale was your goal, okay, steer it there at the end. If the meeting somebody was your goal, okay, there you go. There's so many ways that just providing information can either unlock a relationship or something that helps break down that, anxiety of, I have to sell this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's kind
Makes
of
sense.
I guess my approach. It's like, if I feel uncomfortable, just start talking, about whatever.
Start sharing.
Yeah, just about whatever. Get comfortable,
Yeah. I think across the board, for any industry, storytelling is really important, which I think maybe encapsulates what you're saying right now, about, right, the sale is important, closing that deal, but the more your potential client or customer knows about what you know and why you're the obvious choice or the only choice, right, for the job, is really important. So I think it applies to like all entrepreneurs, creatives, or people in high growth startups and things like that. I did have a question prepared related to what Heather has brought up and what you've kind of been talking about in terms of stepping into the business side of things, where you're a creator, and earlier you mentioned that you really enjoyed painting, and that was where you thought you were going in that direction. In your experience as a mentor and as a business coach for the UNT students that have kind of been under your wing, what have you noticed that maybe they have, that has been a challenge to them or an obstacle to them, right, as a creative, moving into doing business, landing that sale, closing that deal?
Sure. I think most of the time it's, where do I start? And that's a complex question, because school is driven around projects and timelines, which is good because that teaches you how to complete on a deadline. But it also is a place to explore multiple ways of doing things, or interests, or topics. And I don't know if anybody really leaves, let's say, their undergrad curriculum specifically for like art, and even in other degree programs, besides say like professional programs like a doctor, or a lawyer or something like that. That's different, right? But coming straight out with a 4-year degree program, most people being somewhere in their early 20s, a lot's going through your mind, like, now what do I do? 2, where's my time? 3, where am I going to live? 4, everybody's saying get a job, or asking that question, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And you're like, I don't know where to start. I guess I'm going to start over here, so that's that first thing. And usually, since I've worked with so many different clients, it's like, when a student tells me that, and I see their work, or what they're interested in, or what they're having successes in, even small ones, it's usually pretty easy for me to put that together for them, to be like, look, this is a good start. You enjoy, let's say, welding, and you want to make sculptures, but your parents are upset because you're making these sculptures and it's taking up all their room in their garage. Then they're asking you if you want to move out, when are you going to move out, kind of thing. Like, so start going out there and giving them to places. I'm an artist, I'm doing marketing, I place this in your business, I think it'd be a good fit. Business owner goes, well, what do you want for that? I don't want anything, just to people to see my work, and if they ask about it, send them my way, and that little first starting point about getting over the hump of like taking your artwork out into the real world, but not necessarily under the pressure of, say, getting into a gallery or a business structure that you don't understand, I think is like really important, you know, for people exiting, to look around their local community and be like, you know, just think, you know, who could I go and talk to that might enjoy this? And not even on a sales level, you know. And that's how I did that for a while. And that, you know, because I made sculptures, or I did murals, you know, I did murals for a long time. That was the painting background. And I'd just go tell people, it was like, can I paint a mural here? If you'll pay for the material, it's going to cost $125 in paint, and I'll paint the whole thing. You know, I just want to go forward and, you know, try to get a job from here or something. You know, that taught me a lot about, you know, what people valued. And then from there, those relationships that were built, because you never know, you know, a year later, you know, Mark from Sandwiches on the Square or whatever calls you up, and he was like, hey, somebody was in here asking about that painting, they really liked it. Do you make gates? Today I do, Mark. Yes, I do, you know. And it's like, do that over and over and over and over again, because you never know what you're going to stumble across or learn. So that's usually like that first thing that I'll tell students getting out. It's like, push the gallery aside for a second. You're still exploring yourself. You're not ready usually for a gallery. But some are. I'm not saying that all aren't. Some are, some aren't. And you know, there's several different ways that you can be creative in developing your career, you know. So
Awesome. Thanks for that response. We did have Laura join the call. So if y'all have any questions at any point, feel free to go ahead and just ask them or drop them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that if you're not in a position to speak out loud. I would like to pause at least for a few seconds, because sometimes you start talking over someone. So kind of related to that last bit of information that you gave us. Yay, welcome, Laura. No worries about joining late. We're glad you're here. My next question is about art, public art, or art in public spaces and things like that, right? Like murals on the walls at the made-up sandwich shop that you just mentioned. I did kind of just want everyone to hear about your thoughts on the power of public art. I still, sometimes this quote of yours just floats through my head in quiet moments, but you said, you posed the question about what public art can be other than beautification in our previous conversation. And then you also just mentioned that cultural attraction brings economic drivers. And to me, as someone in Denton who works in a co-working space, who supports people who maybe, you know, have arrived to Denton from somewhere like Austin or another place, like, yeah, what brought them here? So if you could kind of speak on those 2 points, I'd love to hear, and hopefully everyone else can gain also from your thoughts.
yeah, sure. So public art, you know, serving beyond beautification has been something I think that I've wrestled with for a long time as like a traditionally, you know, trained artist. I was traditionally trained first by a builder, and then I go into grad school and things change, and it was conceptually driven. It was very confusing, you know, very confusing. So I was kind of split there. But I knew I wanted to do work that was easy for people to approach. And even if it was just like, that's cool, and walk on, that's wow, yay, did my job. And I love monumental scale. I did a lot of residencies with, you know, working sculptors that built monumental stuff. And there was just this power to it. You were just drawn to it and placed in these public areas for everybody to experience and have their own reflections or thoughts or insights on, or messages gathered from it, is free information. You know, it's a really powerful concept, I think. And it seems like our culture is very much driven to places of power, you know, and I use this silly analogy all the time to kind of get from this point into the next question. It's kind of like that big ball of string that you hear about in the middle of Nebraska or Kansas or wherever the hell it is. But that big giant ball of string that somebody just started winding, and they make this, you know, huge giant ball of string out here. Come see it, everybody. Take your picture with it, you know, like for real. Like it's somewhere out there, the world's biggest frying pan, or the world's biggest this, or the world's biggest that, you know, like those kinds of things kind of originated in America. And they've grown into these cultural destinations that people from all over the world, you know, a stock exchange guy from New York is like, I saw that big string. I want to go see that. You know, like that's our bucket list. You're just drawn to these things, you know, and they take all different shapes and sizes. I mean, think of like Disney World, or, you know, any Mount Rushmore, you know, these big attractions that are just so much bigger than yourself. And for some reason, you just go, I want to go. I just want to see it. You know, I want to experience it and tell people that story. And then maybe they go see it. You know, you never know. So I think fundamentally, you know, we're psychologically drawn to things that are bigger than us, that we don't quite understand. And that creates, you know, the ecosystem around it. So for instance, that small town in Nebraska or Kansas, wherever that big giant ball string is, they probably have visitors all year, and they come and they shop in their stores and stay in their hotels, and they buy their merchandise, and they generate, you know, sustainability for that area. And we see that in, I mean, how many people come and see the Statue of Liberty every year, and how much economics is brought into that area and sustains locals and creates stories, and, you know, it just does all these things. And that was something that was very interesting to me. And it was like, especially in Denton, and I was like, you know, Denton doesn't have anything like that. They don't have a monumental piece of artwork or symbol or something here that people travel to, you know, per se, like than other cities that have either they're older or they have a bigger, you know, economic system to support that. But that was what kind of clicked in my brain and started to drive us into our other projects, was like, one, how can we create something that draws people in like that, but is also representative to the city that we live in? And two, how can other places benefit from that, you know? So that's really what has led us into our other projects, but that's might be another question. But that's kind of how I think about it, you know. And there's so many use cases in urban development areas, or, you know, just any major developing parts of, you know, even our North Texas area, that they centralize around, you know, big things where people can come and, you know, be a part and support that whole ecosystem that's around it. So that's really interesting to me.
That is awesome. Of course, my brain immediately wonders and goes to like, I wonder where that ball of string is and where those monumental sculptures are. And I was going to ask if you thought that there is something in Denton that is like, you know, on the art side, more creative side. Oh, Laura found it in the chat. The world's largest ball of twine is in
Kansas.
Kansas. You were there, close. But yeah, so I guess you did already answer the question of like what like Denton maybe doesn't have that kind of attraction. And before I ask this question, because we are at 12:50, if there's anyone else, Allison or Laura, Jillian, Mary, Heather, Julie, have any questions for Brandon as we creep towards 1 o'clock? Okay, no responses just yet, but again, feel free to drop those in the chat or just unmute if you do have a question. What was I going to ask? For a question that I was saving for the final few minutes was about power to the pugs. I was wondering if that's you, and then I may just pose that question now because I can't remember what I was going to ask before that. So yeah, what is the Power to the Pugs project you or people you know, and what is that about?
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
there's a pug behind you, so I have a hint now.
Oh no, what pug? No, I'm just kidding. As they're all up there, you see those little lines right there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is it is us, and it's kind of a fun little persona that branches off of 23. It points back to us, but we wanted, this is kind of the second iteration of this project. Let me start there. So we wanted to create, these small collectibles that the local community could basically come together and crowdfund an idea of a sculpture, and dogs for two reasons, because Denton is a super dog community. Dogs are everywhere and everybody loves dogs. And two, our shop dog, Roger, was a pug. And I mean, if I was welding, he was there. If I was moving the forklift, he was there. If I was running a machine, he was underneath it. He was just all around, and it's like, I guess, an homage to that, idea of companionship for animals. And I think it's very fitting to the culture of Denton. So that's kind of where we started with. And it was like, all right, but our first iteration, it wasn't quite panned out, or it, was a little, it just didn't quite make sense. So then we found NFTs and that community, and then it started to click a little bit more for us, and what we were really trying to build, and it was community awareness, and then this sense of contribution to what you would like to see in your city. And then on top of that, something, because I spoke with crowdfunding, where it was like, no matter what, everybody's a crowdfunder for public sculpture, whether they know it or not. It's called taxes. This just has an opportunity to, either you could support this idea and what it represented, or not. Either way, you can be a contributor, you can not, and that's fine. So how it's kind of started to develop is, we wanted to, one, let people know that there's sculptures and points of interest around their city. They just need to go outside and experience them. And that's where hiding these little pug sculptures that we have all around the city, these little guys.
So cute.
Yeah, we hide these everywhere, and we have a little map and everything on our Power to the Pugs website that people can just either stumble across or actually go and try to hunt for them. So it's already, one, it's engaging, and two, people are responding, and they're either going out to these spaces and they're like, oh, I didn't know this place existed, and we grabbed some food or a drink, or saw a sculpture or something, and then two, they're starting to paint them and share them and make them their own. And that's something that we were discussing with the community and asking, and everybody, it just gives everybody opportunity to be a little bit creative, or at least be a part of something. So it's kind of like, I guess you could say, our outreach point of the project, because our final mission with it is eventually build a monumental sculpture of a dog for Denton, but for the purpose of it representing outside of organizations or nonprofits, or things that at that point the community can put their 2 cents in and be like, what organization would you like to bring awareness to? I don't know a greater awareness bringer than a monumental piece of artwork outside of something. And I haven't found it yet, and especially one that's driven by a community. So that is kind of where we thought public art could serve better. Because imagine placing one of these somewhere and everybody benefiting from that area, especially the organization of interest. So then it goes beyond beautification and serves as a driver, whether culturally, community, or economically.
That is so cool. Those are the words. Those are the only words that I have at the moment to describe the project that you have created. Yeah, I love that you said that this allows folks to be creative, whether they choose to paint their pug and share it, or it just allows them to participate and then go to a spot or find, be part of that engagement. That's really cool. All right, we're at 12:56. Any questions from y'all? Julie in the chat said thanks for today's lunch and learn.
Yeah, my pleasure.